Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the turbulent 1960s. Now, this was a decade that didn't just change society, it completely ripped up the rulebook for the horror genre, and most importantly, for the women on screen.
So think about 1950s horror for a second. What pops into your head? It's probably alien invaders, giant radioactive bugs, right? All of these fears were about something from the outside, something out there coming to get us. But then the 60s came along and just turned everything on its head. The horror wasn't out there anymore. It was inside. Inside our homes, inside our families, and maybe most terrifying of all, inside our own minds.
So here's how we're going to break down this incredible transformation. We'll start with how the old stereotypes got shattered. Then we'll dive into the psychological terror that redefined everything. And we'll wrap up by looking at the very strange, very modern afterlife these horror icons are having today. Okay, first up, to really get what a huge leap the 60s took, we have to understand what the job description for a horror heroine was before all this. And let me tell you, it was pretty limited.
For decades, really, the main role for women in horror was to just be fragile. Be the damsel in distress. Her whole purpose was to faint when the monster showed up or let out this perfectly innocent scream. They were basically just objects for the terror to happen to, not characters driving their own stories.
But the 1960s, man, that was a chaotic time. And audiences were getting tired of the same old thing. They were ready for something that actually felt like the wild, messy world they were living in. And a whole new generation of filmmakers was ready to give it to them, breaking all the rules and all the taboos along the way.
And this whole revolution, you could say it all started in a quiet, unassuming motel, with a little film that completely changed the game.
Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho wasn't just another scary movie. Oh no, it was a cultural bombshell. It took every single thing an audience expected from a horror film and just completely blew it up, turning all those old fears inward with some seriously terrifying results.
So here's what Psycho did. Suddenly, the monster wasn't some vampire in a castle, it was the quiet, clean-cut kid who lived right next door. The source of all this evil wasn't some ancient curse, it was the family itself. And our heroine, Marion Crane, she was no innocent flower, she was a thief on the run, a complicated, morally gray character who was a million miles away from the fainting ladies of the past.
Now let's hop across the pond to Europe, because over there, filmmakers were taking these new ideas and just painting their nightmares in vivid, glorious, and terrifying color.
In Europe, you had studios like Hammer in the UK and directors like Mario Bava in Italy, who were just unleashing this incredible wave of gothic horror. They brought Dracula and Frankenstein back, but this time in bloody, beautiful Technicolor. And they created this brutal, stylish new type of thriller called giallo, known for its wild violence and psychological dread.
And these movies, they created a totally new kind of horror heroine. You had actresses like Barbara Shelley and Hazel Court playing these women who were just fiery, sensual, and so complex. They weren't just screaming victims. I mean, get this, in The Mask of the Red Death, Hazel Court's character literally brands herself and offers herself up as Satan's bride. This was a huge deal. For the first time since the film noir era of the 40s, horror was the place to find some of the most provocative and powerful roles for women.
Meanwhile, back in Hollywood, a totally different kind of revolution was brewing. This one was led by absolute screen legends who decided, you know what, let's take the biggest risks of our entire careers.
You had actresses like the one and only Bette Davis. Now, she had spent decades fighting a studio system that was constantly trying to sideline strong, powerful women. And in this new wave of psychological thrillers, she found a brand new and very powerful weapon.
And what was that weapon? It was a fearless, courageous willingness to be absolutely monstrous on screen. In movies like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Davis and her famous rival Joan Crawford just dove right into this new subgenre called grande dame guignol. They performed under these harsh, unflattering lights, caked in grotesque makeup, to play these sadistic, twisted, and deeply damaged women. They completely shattered their glamorous Hollywood images, and it was incredible.
So as the decade came to a close and it felt like the social fabric of America was really tearing apart, horror got darker, it got bleaker, and it got way more political than ever before.
Look no further than George Romero's masterpiece, Night of the Living Dead. Okay, the zombies clawing at the windows are scary, for sure, but the real genius of the movie is how it shows you that the most dangerous monster might just be the person barricaded in the house right there with you.
This film came out in 1968, the same year as the Civil Rights Act, and that is no coincidence. The real conflict isn't just people versus zombies, it's people versus people. The tension between Ben, the resourceful black hero, and Mr. Cooper, the paranoid, prejudiced white survivor, well, that was a raw commentary on a deeply divided America. Mr. Cooper's prejudice, his inability to trust Ben, is what ultimately gets them all killed.
And in one of the most shocking endings in film history, nobody wins. Ben, our hero, the guy who makes it through the entire night using his wits and his courage, he's mistaken for a ghoul the next morning and shot dead by a posse of humans. As actress Judith O'Dea put it, the ending is just so powerfully bleak, and for the times, it was incredibly appropriate.
So what's the legacy of all this? What happens to these groundbreaking women, these icons who completely changed the game? Well, their story doesn't end when the credits roll.
Turns out, they never really died. Their influence is everywhere. You can see their DNA in every final girl, in every slasher movie, in all the complex heroines we see today. But now, their actual images are being resurrected in ways they could have never, ever imagined.
Yeah, we've stepped into a really strange new world. You've got artists making Marilyn of the Dead prints, mixing that classic Hollywood glam with zombie horror. And even wilder, AI tech can now create these super convincing deepfakes, literally bringing long-dead stars back to life for new movie roles. They've become a whole new kind of undead.
And this isn't some far-off future stuff. People are talking about it right now online. Can you imagine a whole movie about a star starring a digital ghost of that same actor? The line between paying tribute and, well, digital grave robbing is getting really, really thin.
And that, right there, is the ultimate question. The women who redefined horror back in the 60s broke every boundary they could. They were complex, they were monstrous, and they were powerful. And now, decades later, they are still forcing us to ask some really tough questions. Not about monsters anymore, but about technology, about legacy, and ultimately, about ourselves.